Have you ever felt confused or frustrated by the injustices of the world around you? Have you ever wondered why evil seems to thrive while the righteous suffer? The prophet Habakkuk faced these very questions at a time of great disorder and violence. In this video, we will understand the mysteries of the moving story of the prophet Habakkuk, a courageous man who dared to question God in search of answers. We'll explore his journey from a desperate cry for justice, through God's surprising response, to the revelation of a vision of hope and faith. Discover how Habakkuk turned his doubts into a song of praise, finding peace and confidence in the midst of chaos. This story is not just an ancient reflection, but a powerful lesson for our times, offering valuable insights into faith, perseverance, and divine justice. Get ready for a spiritual journey that will touch your heart and strengthen your faith, showing that even in the darkest moments, hope in God can guide us to the light. Subscribe to this channel and leave your like on this video so you cooperate with the growth of this channel, and I understand that these stories make sense to you. Habakkuk lived in a time of great disorder and injustice in Judah. The land that was once blessed and prosperous was now steeped in corruption and violence. The rich exploited the poor, the powerful oppressed the weak, and morality seemed to be forgotten. In the midst of this chaos, Habakkuk, a man of deep faith, saw the decay of his society and could not understand why God allowed such wickedness to prosper. The prophet begins his book with a desperate cry to God, a lament that echoes the anguish of his heart. "How long, Lord, must I call for help, but you do not listen?" His voice resonates with the pain and frustration of someone who feels abandoned amidst suffering. Habakkuk does not hide his emotions. He does not fear expressing his profound doubts. He addresses God with brutal honesty, reflecting the tension between his unwavering faith and the grim reality he witnesses around him. Each day, as Habakkuk walked through the streets of Judah, he saw injustice and impiety. He saw the poor being treated like trash while the rich feasted in luxury. God's laws were ignored, and violence had become the norm. His heart was heavy, not just with his own suffering, but with the suffering of all his people. He wondered how a just and loving God could allow such things to happen. His faith was being tested, and he needed answers. However, Habakkuk was not just a passive observer. He was a courageous and sincere prophet, willing to confront God in search of answers. He knew that his questions were difficult, perhaps even painful, but he also knew he needed to understand. He wanted to know why God seemed distant, why his prayers went unanswered, and why justice seemed so scarce. Habakkuk believed that God had a purpose, even if he could not see it clearly at that moment. This confrontation was not an affront to God, but a desperate heart crying out to his Lord for answers for all the injustice his eyes were witnessing. This powerful and emotionally charged beginning establishes Habakkuk as a fervent defender of justice, someone who is not content with easy answers. He represents all those who have ever felt lost by the apparent absence of divine justice. His story is a reflection of the internal struggle between faith and doubt, a battle that many face in their own lives. Habakkuk teaches us that it is possible to question God and still keep the faith, that it is possible to cry out for justice and hope for answers, even in the darkest moments. Remember that we are talking about the people of Judah themselves. Those men who were once treated as God's people chose to live apart from their Lord and his commandments, and gave themselves over to injustice, idolatry, and the avarice of their sins. Habakkuk positions himself as the voice of those who suffer, those who cry out for help and seem to go unheard. He invites us to join his journey, to feel his pain and his hope. It is in this relentless search for answers that his story truly begins, a story that challenges us to confront our own doubts and to find faith amidst uncertainty. Habakkuk, with his courage and sincerity, shows us that it is possible to have unshakable faith even when everything around us seems to be falling apart. God responds to Habakkuk in an unexpected and disturbing manner. He announces that he is raising the Babylonians, a fierce and merciless people, to execute judgment on Judah. This news hits Habakkuk like a blow. He expected God to bring justice, but he never imagined it would mean the rise of such a cruel enemy. The Babylonians were known for their brutality and lack of mercy. They destroyed everything in their path, spreading terror and desolation. How could a just God use such a wicked nation to punish his own people? Habakkuk's mind is flooded with a new wave of questions and concerns. He finds himself facing an even greater moral and spiritual dilemma. If Judah is being punished for its wickedness, how can it be just for an even more wicked people to be the instrument of this judgment? Habakkuk questions divine justice and wisdom, trying to understand how this fits into God's grand plan. His perplexity is profound, and he expresses it with clarity and passion. Your eyes are too pure to look on evil. You cannot tolerate wrongdoing. Why then do you tolerate the treacherous? Why are you silent while the wicked swallow up those more righteous than themselves? Habakkuk cries out. The sincerity of his words reveals not only his anguish, but also his deep reverence and faith in God. He is not accusing God of injustice. He is desperately trying to understand what seems to be an unbearable contradiction. God's response, however, does not aim to immediately comfort Habakkuk. Instead, God is teaching the prophet to look beyond immediate appearances and trust in his higher plans. God is showing Habakkuk that divine justice can be incomprehensible from a human perspective, but it is perfect and infallible. This intense dialogue between the prophet and God deepens the narrative, bringing forth issues of faith, justice, and the nature of God that resonate deeply with all who have ever questioned suffering and evil in the world. Habakkuk finds himself in a place of extreme vulnerability. He is being called to trust God in a way that challenges his understanding and expectations. God's revelation does not solve all his problems, but it opens a path to deeper understanding and stronger faith. He is being invited to see divine justice from a new perspective, to recognize that God's ways are higher than ours, and that even in darkness, God is working for the ultimate good. This moment in Habakkuk's story is crucial. It is a turning point where his faith is tested to the limit. God's response, seemingly paradoxical, is not an end, but the beginning of a deeper journey of discovery and trust. Habakkuk must confront his own limitations and learn to rest in God's infinite wisdom. This process of questioning and revelation makes the story rich in emotion and meaning, leading the audience to reflect on their own faith and the complexity of divine justice. In his relentless search for answers, Habakkuk invites us to do the same. He challenges us not to fear our doubts, but to bring them to God, trusting that in due time, He will give us the understanding we need. This dialogue between Habakkuk and God shows us that true faith is not the absence of questions, but the courage to seek answers even when they seem impossible. Not satisfied with the initial response, Habakkuk raises his concerns to a new level, crying out for a deeper explanation. He cannot accept that a greater evil is used to correct a lesser evil. With a mixture of courage and despair, he continues to question God, highlighting his passion for justice and his desire to see righteousness prevail. He cries out vehemently, "Why do you look on the treacherous and are silent when the wicked swallow up those more righteous than they?" Habakkuk is in a moment of intense spiritual crisis. He finds himself facing a divine paradox that challenges his understanding. His mind is filled with images of the Babylonians, a people known for their cruelty and violence, devastating his land. How can this be just? He ponders the nature of God, who is pure and holy, and struggles to reconcile this purity with the use of such a vile instrument for judgment. Habakkuk's cry reveals not only his frustration, but also his unwavering search for clarity. He wants to deeply understand God's plans and divine justice. His persistence in seeking answers shows us a prophet who, even in the midst of doubt, does not abandon his faith but uses it as an anchor for his questioning. God, in his mercy and wisdom, responds again to Habakkuk. This time he assures the prophet that justice will be served, and the Babylonians, in turn, will be judged for their iniquities. God reveals a series of woes against Babylon, detailing the sins and cruelties for which they will be punished. He describes the destruction that the Babylonians will bring upon themselves due to their arrogance, violence, and idolatry. This response offers Habakkuk a vision of the future, where divine justice will prevail. The complexity of divine justice is unveiled in a profound way in this segment. God shows Habakkuk that his justice is neither linear nor immediate, but is infallible and comprehensive. He teaches the prophet that evil will not go unpunished, and that at the right time, every nation and every person will receive their due judgment. This revelation not only brings partial consolation to Habakkuk, but also a new understanding that God is sovereign over all the nations of the world, and his justice will prevail. It also demonstrates that God's will goes beyond human understanding. Habakkuk begins to realize that his limited vision cannot encompass the vastness of God's divine plan. He understands that God, in his infinite wisdom, is working towards a greater good, even when the methods seem incomprehensible. This realization does not eliminate his doubts but transforms his understanding of divine justice and sovereignty. In the process, Habakkuk teaches us a valuable lesson about persistence in the search for divine answers. His story invites us to persevere in prayer to God, remembering that true faith questions and seeks understanding, knowing that God is big enough to deal with our doubts and concerns. Habakkuk's cry for justice is a reflection of our own search for meaning and order in an often chaotic and unjust world. Habakkuk's narrative is rich in emotion and complexity, illustrating the persistence of a man in seeking clarity amidst confusion. His determination to question God and his willingness to listen to the divine response offer us a powerful insight into the relationship between faith and understanding. Through his questions and the answers he receives, Habakkuk challenges us to explore the depth of divine justice and to trust in God's wisdom, even when it challenges us. God offers Habakkuk a vision of hope, a vision that brings comfort and a new perspective. He reveals that in the end, justice will prevail and the wicked will be punished. At the heart of this revelation, God delivers a powerful and eternal message: the righteous will live by faith. This statement would become a fundamental pillar not only for Habakkuk, but for Judeo-Christian theology, echoing through the centuries as a call to trust and perseverance. Habakkuk, faced with this revelation, begins to understand the depth and necessity of trusting in God's plans, even when he can't see the immediate result. He realizes that faith is not just a passive belief, but an active force that sustains the righteous through trials and consequently perseverance in faith in a just God. Faith is the light that shines in the darkness, guiding the faithful even when the path seems uncertain. This vision of hope transforms Habakkuk's lament into a song of faith. He moves from a state of despair and questioning to one of trust and expectation. Habakkuk understands that although God's justice may seem slow to human eyes, it is certain and infallible. God is working in ways that are often beyond human comprehension, but always with a purpose of justice and redemption. Inspired by God's vision, Habakkuk begins to see the world in a new light. He recognizes that true faith is not based on visible circumstances, but on trust in God's character and promises. This realization brings profound peace to his heart, transforming his perspective and renewing his hope. The prophet, who was once consumed by anguish and despair, now finds a new strength. He becomes a living example of how faith can transform a person's outlook, leading them from a place of doubt to one of certainty. His spiritual journey reflects the internal struggle of many who seek to understand God's purpose amidst suffering. Habakkuk begins to proclaim this message of faith and hope to his people. He encourages others to trust in God, even when circumstances seem adverse. His own experience becomes a powerful testimony to the transformative power of faith. He teaches that, although we may not understand all the details of God's plans, we can trust that He is just and good. The message of the righteous will live by faith resonates strongly not only in his time but through the generations, reaching the hearts of the faithful to this day. It reminds us that faith is an anchor in times of storm, a sure guide when the path seems uncertain. Habakkuk, through his journey of questioning and revelation, shows us that it is possible to find hope and purpose even in the most difficult circumstances. With his renewed vision, Habakkuk continues to seek justice and proclaim God's faithfulness. He challenges us to follow his example, to not fear our doubts, but to use faith as a compass to navigate the complexities of life. His story is a powerful reminder that amid chaos and injustice, faith in God remains an unshakable constant. The book of Habakkuk culminates in a poetic and powerful prayer, where the prophet expresses his renewed faith. After a journey of doubt and questioning, Habakkuk finds a place of deep peace and trust in God. His prayer, recorded in the final chapter, is a song of praise that echoes down the ages, demonstrating the transformation that true faith can bring about in the human heart. Even knowing that God would send a nation like Babylon to discipline the people of Judah, Habakkuk begins his prayer by recognizing God's majesty and recalling his powerful actions in the past. He speaks of God's deeds with a reverence that comes from a deep understanding of his greatness and sovereignty. He mentions how God delivered his people from Egypt, parted the sea, and led them through the desert with power and glory. These memories are not just ancient stories for Habakkuk. They are living testimonies of God's faithfulness and ability to intervene in human history. He then declares, "Lord, I have heard of your fame. I stand in awe of your deeds, Lord. Repeat them in our day and our time, make them known. In wrath, remember mercy." Habakkuk calls for a renewal of God's mighty acts, but also asks for mercy, recognizing the continuous need of the people of Judah for divine grace. This request reflects Habakkuk's new understanding of the balance between God's justice and mercy. As Habakkuk continues his prayer, he acknowledges the possibility of the worst scenarios coming true. He envisions a future where the fig tree does not bud, there are no grapes on the vines, the fields produce no food, and there are no cattle in the stalls. These powerful and evocative images paint a picture of desolation and total loss. However, it is precisely in this scenario that Habakkuk's faith shines most intensely. He proclaims with unwavering conviction, "Yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will be joyful in God my Savior." This declaration is a testament to Habakkuk's resilient faith. He affirms that, regardless of external circumstances, his joy and confidence are firmly anchored in God. This joy does not depend on material blessings or a life without problems, but on a deep and continuous relationship with the Creator. Habakkuk's prayer is a powerful reminder that true trust in God transcends circumstances. It challenges us to maintain our faith and hope, even in the darkest moments, trusting in God's justice and goodness. Habakkuk shows us that faith is not the absence of problems, but the certainty that God is with us in the midst of them. Habakkuk's song of praise thus becomes a hymn of spiritual resistance and eternal trust. He teaches us that, as we face our own struggles and uncertainties, we can find strength and joy in God. Habakkuk's faith, forged in the fire of doubt and anguish, emerges stronger and purer like refined gold. By concluding his book with this powerful prayer, Habakkuk leaves us a legacy of hope and perseverance. He invites us to look beyond immediate difficulties and trust in God's great plan, knowing that He is faithful and just. Habakkuk's story, rich in emotion and full of deep spiritual lessons, continues to inspire and encourage the hearts of the faithful to this day. Habakkuk, through his journey of questioning, revelation, and praise, offers us a shining example of how faith can transform our lives. He challenges us to be honest in our doubts, persistent in our search for answers, and firm in our trust in God. His story is an eternal testimony to the strength of faith and the beauty of unwavering trust in the Lord. Write in the comments now if you are going through, or have gone through, situations in which you have seen injustice thrive. Take the opportunity to also write what you learned from Habakkuk's story. May God bless your life. See you in the next video.